Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, today I am going to be giving you something that's an incredibly useful tool. So I've been thinking about some things, and there are certain things in fantasy that just don't get covered enough. So I have a list here of things that you need to do to gain a huge edge on your opponents this season. And these are things that very few fantasy analysts ever talk about. And people seem to neglect these things. Literally, like 99% of people that play fantasy football don't do these things. So I want to give you guys this list to make sure that y'all are getting a critical edge in your league. So, I'm going to be giving you this list, and I'm going to start right here with the very first thing on my list, and that is that you need to study offensive lines. Now, 99% of people that play fantasy football, they go into their fantasy draft and they have no idea what kind of offensive line the running backs that they're drafting are running behind. And this can give you an extreme advantage or disadvantage depending on whether or not you've done the research. So when you look at the best offensive lines in the NFL, you're pretty much looking at the Eagles, the Browns, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Lions, the Falcons, and the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, those are the best offensive lines in the NFL. And if you've noticed, with every single team I just mentioned, there's a trend. They all have at least two fantasy relevant players. And, fantasy superstars, because that's what great offensive lines do. Great offensive lines produce great offenses. Great offenses produce great fantasy weapons, okay? And this is something that a lot of people neglect. So when you're going into your draft and you're faced with tough decisions and you feel like you're really, really close on two players and you're not sure who to take, well, whichever team has a better offensive line might be the one you lean to. So if you have a really tough decision between two players, especially at the running back position, choose the team with the better offensive line. Choose the player on the team with the better offensive line because they're going to have more overall upside because their offense is going to be scoring more points. They're going to have bigger holes to run through. So I think it's quite obvious that great offensive lines are going to make running backs better. We know that, but people don't research offensive lines going into the draft. So make sure to do this to gain a critical edge on your opponents. Next on my list is you need to study Vegas point totals. Okay, so going into every week, Vegas has point totals for the week, and you can see what the highest scoring games are going to be and what the lowest scoring games are going to be. And higher scoring games are inevitably going to produce more fantasy points, right? So, this is another thing that's going to help with tiebreakers and close calls when setting your lineup on a weekly basis. If you're not sure who to pick, a lot of times it's better to just pick the player that's going to be in the higher scoring game because they have significantly more likelihood of putting up an awesome fantasy performance. And what this also does is it helps you determine game script. So, if a team is heavily favored and you've got a running back decision to make, and you're not sure, do I want to play this guy or this guy this week? Well, if you play the running back that's on the team that's, projected to annihilate another team, game script is going to favor that running back because they're probably going to be playing with the lead most of the time. So yeah, that's what you want to do. So like some examples, like, the Cowboys are going to be a good football team. This is why I'm so big on Tony Pollard. Not only does he run behind a great offensive line, not only does he have incredible talent and significantly higher touchdown upside than almost any running back in the league, he's on a team that's going to be playing with the lead a lot. So he's going to get a very healthy opportunity share out of the backfield as far as his carries. Now, another reason I like Tony Pollard is because he's not even necessarily game script dependent because he's so involved in the passing game that even if the Cowboys are behind, he's going to get fed. But it's even better if they're playing with the lead because they're going to give him a ton of carries. So these are the kind of running backs you want. Running backs that are on winning teams that not only produce a lot of points because they have a good offense, but they're going to be playing with a lead a lot. So that means more carries for their running backs. Next on my list is you don't want to go out of your way to get quarterback wide receiver stacks. Now, if you've been following my channel over the offseason, I've been talking a lot about the importance of getting a great quarterback wide receiver stack. This is incredibly important. However, you shouldn't reach for players just to complete a stack. Like, I'm in these underdog drafts and I see all these, all my opponents, they're going through and they're reaching on quarterbacks just to complete a quarterback wide receiver stack. This isn't smart. Quarterback wide receiver stacks are very important, but they're not more important than getting the best value possible at your pick. So, if you're reaching for Joe Burrow in round 3, when you could get him in round 4 just because you drafted Jamar Chase in round 1, this is not a good strategy. Your strategy should be to wait to try to get Joe Burrow in round 4 like, you very well could because most of the time he's going in round 4 on underdog drafts. This is what you should do. And if somebody else gets Joe Burrow, no big deal. Another one of your teams with Jamar Chase, you'll be able to get him, but don't go out of your way to reach for a stack and give up value in your picks. So, some good quarterback wide receiver stacks that I like as far as their value: Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper, Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley. These are all stacks that you could get that not only are going to potentially produce awesome point totals for you, but a lot of times you won't have to reach for your stack because, you could get Deshaun Watson in the mid to later rounds. You could get Trevor Lawrence in the mid to later rounds, right? You could get Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley at good value. When it comes to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you've obviously got to get Jamar Chase in round 1, but a lot of times you can wait until round 4 to get Joe Burrow, whereas with the stack like, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, you pretty much got to get them in round 1 and 2 or round 1 and 3. Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, same thing, right? So these stacks that I mentioned have awesome value, and a lot of times you won't have to end up reaching for the quarterback. Next on my list is this one is going to be underdog and best ball specific. So I want you guys to go with a very healthy amount of 3 tight end builds in your underdog drafts that include Taysom Hill as one of your tight ends. And here's why. We know that Taysom Hill has a massively high weekly ceiling because there are weeks where he's used as a running back and he just absolutely goes off. And obviously the Alvin Kamara situation is a mess. We really don't know how the backfield's going to operate. So you got to figure that Taysom Hill's going to have a game or 2 this year, maybe 3 games where he just absolutely explodes. And it could happen in the final week of the season when you are in your best ball championship if you're able to make it that far. And that could be the difference between you winning your entire league and, not winning your entire league, right? So what you want to do is you want to build these 3 tight end builds with Taysom Hill as one of your tight ends to get that ceiling out of Taysom Hill and potentially get that ceiling performance in the final week of the season. But you also have to couple him with 2 other tight ends, if you're drafting tight ends late. Now, if you draft a tight end early, you can maybe pull off 1 tight end in Taysom Hill, but I wouldn't recommend this because I really don't like taking tight ends early in underdog drafts all that often. I do it a very small percentage of the time, but what you could do is you could wait on these guys and you could get Taysom Hill along with Sam Laporta and Luke Musgrave, or Jake Ferguson and Mike Gesicki, Tyler Conklin and Sam Laporta. There's all kinds of awesome 3 tight end build combinations where you could get 2 really good tight ends in the later rounds of the drafts and couple them with Taysom Hill. That way your tight end position is going off every single week. And in the final week of the season, you could potentially get that massive game where Taysom Hill basically plays the running back position and gives you 30 points as a tight end. And even if he doesn't, you've got 2 other really good tight ends that are reliable for you all season long and in the final week of the season. Go with these 3 tight end builds that include Taysom Hill as one of your tight ends as an elite strategy for best ball to optimize your best ball roster and potentially win you a ton of money on Underdog Fantasy. Next and final thing on my list is I want you guys to pay very close attention to age at the running back position. Now, 3 running backs that I have here that are getting older that were all really good last year, but we've got to keep in mind that they're getting older, are Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, and Aaron Jones. Now, I love all these running backs, and I'm not saying that they're necessarily just going to fall off a cliff this year and be terrible. They can all be good again. But you got to keep in mind, Derrick Henry is one of the most used up running backs in the league. He has over 1,750 career carries. He's running behind a bad offensive line. He's on a bad football team. And yeah, at the end of the day, yeah, it's Derrick Henry. The dude defies all logic. He defied all logic last year and was a top 5 PPR running back, despite all these very same things that I'm talking about now being against him. But how long can he defy the odds? Right? Eventually, he's going to fall off, right? Everybody does at some point. He's 29. He's extremely used up. He's on a terrible offense. I think that this is going to be the year that we see Derrick Henry fall off a cliff. So honestly, I would avoid him as much as possible. If you want to take a small amount of Derrick Henry in your best ball drafts, or if you want to take him in one of your redraft leagues, I understand because he's very, very good. As Derrick Henry, he might be the best running back in the league talent-wise. But at the end of the day, this dude's old and he's on a bad offense. I would avoid drafting too much of him. And then when it comes to Austin Eckler and Aaron Jones, I wouldn't say just totally fade these guys. Me personally, I'm fading Austin Eckler because I think that the target share is going to be down with all the wide receivers this year, but he's getting older as well, right? And so is Aaron Jones. So we have to keep in mind when drafting Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, and Derrick Henry, 3 very fantasy relevant running backs, that these guys are getting older, and the age cliff for running backs is 28. This is proven over years of fantasy football research that age 28 and later, running backs absolutely fall off a cliff, and we usually see a very sharp decline in production that seems to come out of nowhere. They could go off the season before, they come into their age 28 season, and then they're just absolutely terrible. This happens all the time, so you at least need to keep this in mind when drafting these 3 running backs. I'm not saying that it's for sure going to happen or that you absolutely have to avoid these guys, but do know they are at the age where running backs see a sharp decline in production. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning into the video. I'll catch you later.